everybody out to sea. So I've got a funny Nirvana story. I moved to Seattle in '93 when I was 12 years old. I was already a rabid Nirvana fan. My mom worked at like the alternative paper where I grew up in Tempe, Arizona, New Times. So I was exposed to a lot of music, art, etc. And songs off of Nevermind started playing on the alternative station when I was like 10, 11 years old in like '91, right? I was a Nirvana fan from the get-go. You know, the more I learned about Kurt Cobain, the more I related. You know, he didn't have a dad around. That deeply hurt him. You know, he was kind of a smaller, feminine dude who got ridiculed and beat up. I related, right? It spoke to me. So, when my mom and I moved to Seattle in '93, I was still 12, I think. We're living in the basement of this nice Victorian house in Wallingford off of like 50th and 1st. And, you know, Wallingford is like just west of the U District. You got the University of Washington, you got the Ave, that at that point in time was kind of like a Haight-Ashbury type situation. You go south of the U District, you got Capitol Hill, First Hill, the Central District. Head a little bit west, you got downtown. You know, further west of the U District in Wallingford, you got Ballard, there's Green Lake. You know, Seattle's broken up into all these neighborhoods. But the U District, Capitol Hill, First Hill, Ballard, Fremont, full of artists and musicians, man. Early mid-90s in Seattle was a pretty cool place. And it wasn't just grunge, it was all kinds of stuff. But, you know, my friends were decimated when we learned of Kurt Cobain's suicide. Not necessarily shocked. I had just turned 13. I turned 13 in March, and then Kurt Cobain committed suicide in April, I think it was. About a week after his passing, there was a big vigil at the Seattle Center in downtown Seattle, where you got the Space Needle, there's a big fountain, the center house, there was like some outdoor stages. We'd go to free rock concerts in the summer there called Pain in the Grass. You know, we're seeing the Melvins, Mudhoney, L7, Butthole Surfers, all of that stuff, right? Seattle, early mid-90s. So, this is probably like a week after the vigil at the Seattle Center, after Kurt Cobain has passed. Me and my buddy Connor, both rabid Nirvana fans, are sitting out on the stoop of this house where my mom and I were living in the basement. You know, the family let us hang out on their stoop out front, right? So there's a Volvo comes driving up the street. You know, old 240 four-door sedan Volvo. And we noticed that there's a driver and a passenger. They're both wearing black and white suits. But what stood out is that they had the rubber Nixon masks on. Point Break style. It's like, huh, you don't see that every day. We watch the car go up to the next block, take a left, and park. These guys step out of the car, take off the masks. Lo and behold, it's Dave Grohl and Krist Novoselic. You know, do a double take. It's like, yeah, that's them. We know who they are. We see him walk up the street. We run up the street, get to the corner just in time to see them walking through the front door of a house on the corner. This is like 2 blocks from where I'm living in Wallingford, near 50th and 1st. You know, this is like 94, right? So we start spying on this house. You know, we're in the bushes across the street at night. We're walking around. We're spying on the house. And it sure seems to be that Krist Novoselic is living there. We see him coming and going. We're spying on the house. We patiently wait for Halloween to come around. And when it does, we put on some outfits and we go to Krist Novoselic's hoping that he's there handing out candy, right? Sure enough, he's sitting on the front porch in a pirate outfit, smoking a cigar, and he's got a bin of candy. We get up there, starstruck, like, oh, trick or treat. He looks at us, he's like, hey man, you seem like older kids. You want candy or cigars? We'll take the cigars. He gave us each a fat cigar. You know, we'd never had a cigar, we didn't know how to smoke cigars. We're trying to inhale the thing, just making ourselves ill. And at this point in time, I hadn't yet started doing drugs. I remember being at the vigil, and we're up on the fountain, security's trying to get us off, but there's too many of us, and I smell the weed, and there's kind of shady middle-aged dudes with ponytails offering me and my friends weed. We haven't done it yet. You know, we just been smoking the beaties that you could get at the incense store by the school and the cigar that Krist Novoselic had given us. I was yet to do drugs, but I was curious. I was curious because I knew that my hero, Kurt Cobain, was a drug user. And I remember, you know, reading an article or something about Kurt Cobain and his drug use and the addiction concerns. And I seem to remember reading something about him getting drugs off of Queen Anne Hill or knowing someone there. I remember very clearly, I'm waiting at the 26th stop in Fremont to go back to Wallingford, and it's nighttime. I'm looking across the Fremont Bridge, and there's the north slope of Queen Anne Hill and all the twinkling lights up there. I remember looking up at that hill wondering, I wonder which house Kurt Cobain would go to get his heroin, where he hung out. And in my mind, I pictured this big, nice Victorian house full of bohemian grungers writing and playing music and doing drugs. I was curious. And Kurt Cobain was my hero, and I looked up to him. And it's like, if he does drugs, you know, I have the same pain he does. I'm curious. So it pains me now that I was so deeply influenced by a hardcore junkie. Now that I've experienced heroin addiction in Seattle for myself and had to leave there in 2019 in order to survive, I learned it's not as romantic and bohemian as I pictured it as a child. You know, it's broken, sick individuals, and there's lots of death and suicide and disease. And if you survive, you're one of the lucky ones. And I think Kurt Cobain was also deeply troubled by the fact that he became a role model. He was influential. I think that pained him because he knew, I'm just a broken junkie. I can only imagine what it must be like to have the world by the balls. Fame, money, you know, he got that big house out on the east side of Seattle, you know, where Bill Gates and all the bigwigs are off of Lake Washington. You know, he got out of Capitol Hill and, you know, the modest house of Wallingford. He was out on the east side. And I can only imagine what that must have been like to have the world by the balls and you still can't stop doing heroin. At the end of the day, you're just a junkie. I'm sure that deeply pained him, kind of akin to Jerry Garcia. You know, he's Papa Bear, Happy Jerry. He was a junkie who died in rehab, man. And, you know, there's been stuff coming out of the woodworks recently regarding the conspiracies that Kurt Cobain was assassinated. He was murdered. You know, Courtney Love had him murdered. I think people give Courtney Love way too much credit, man. She was just another junkie. This idea that she's some type of evil genius serial killer who had Kurt murdered. She killed Kristen Pfaff, too. You know, I think there's a reason that all the people who were actually near Kurt Cobain have not gone along with this conspiracy that he was murdered. They all know he offed himself. It's obvious, you know, and all the pictures, when I look back at pictures of Kurt Cobain, his entire musical career, for the most part, clearly strung out on heroin. He's got the pinned eyes, the sores on the face. Like, once you know, you know. And you look at pictures of him, it's obvious, strung out to the gills. When I look at pictures of Kurt Cobain now, I can almost smell the vinegar of tar heroin. I really find these people that are making up these conspiracies that he was murdered and still beating it like a dead horse, it's pathetic. I think it's pathetic. And you know, I guess Kurt Cobain met William Burroughs at one point before he passed. I think he did some music for William Burroughs' spoken word. But William Burroughs, in regards to Kurt's death, is quoted as saying, "It wasn't an act of will for Kurt to kill himself. As far as I was concerned, he was dead already." And then Buzz Osborne of the Melvins, who actually grew up with Kurt Cobain and saw all that go down, in regards to, you know, Kurt's stomach problems that had him doing heroin, you know, that's rich, right? Buzz Osborne said, in regard to Cobain's supposed stomach problems, he made it up for sympathy so he could use it as an excuse to stay loaded. Of course he was vomiting. That's what people on heroin do. They vomit. It's called vomiting with a smile on your face. You know, there's a reason that Dave Grohl, Krist Novoselic, you know, all the people who were near him, they know. It's obvious. The guy offed himself. It was bleeding out of him, you know, and hopefully Kurt Cobain is no longer conscious of this world because he obviously desperately wanted to leave it. But if he can look down and see all these people spewing these conspiracies about him being murdered, I think he's rolling his eyes and it really saddens him because just let the man rest. All right, peace.